The baseline assumption of modern scientific materialism is that consciousness is strictly a biological byproduct. Under this model, the mind is generated by the brain, and when physical neurological activity ceases, the self is permanently extinguished. Early Buddhist philosophy operates on a distinctly different axiom. It posits that consciousness and the material world coexist in a relationship of mutual creation, equally requiring one another to manifest an observable reality. This philosophical divide becomes an empirical problem when we examine a 50-year systematic psychiatric research archive. Researchers have documented thousands of what they term cases of the reincarnation type, anomalous field data that disrupts the strict materialist model of the mind. This methodology was architected by Dr. Ian Stevenson and continued by Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia. Their work relies on rigorous, peer-reviewed standards to investigate children who report highly specific, verifiable memories of previous lives. Within this archive, Rebirth acts as a testable framework for information transfer, providing a functional model for data that physicalist theories struggle to incorporate. Confronting this verified data challenges the paradigm of the universe as an indifferent void. It suggests a layer of systemic order that forces a transition in how we view the relationship between biological death and individual identity. To understand the methodology, we look to the case of James Leininger. At exactly 22 months of age, following a visit to a flight museum, James began exhibiting intense post-traumatic play. This behavior was soon accompanied by severe, recurring nightmares. His parents documented thrashing in bed, repeatedly shouting specific phrases, "airplane crash on fire," and "little man can't get out." By 28 months, his vocabulary expanded to include highly specific proper nouns. When asked what kind of plane he was flying, the toddler correctly identified a World War II fighter aircraft called a Corsair. When asked where the plane took off from, he provided the name of an escort carrier stationed in the Pacific, the Natoma. As he grew older, he drew battle scenes, signing them James III. When pressed, he named a colleague, Jack Larson. The deployment of historically accurate, hyper-specific terminology by a 2-year-old exceeds the documented bounds of childhood fantasy or passive exposure to ambient media. The primary academic critique of reincarnation data is the assumption of retroactive shaping. Skeptics argue that parents identify a historical figure first and then unconsciously mold their child's vague statements to fit that specific life. The Leininger case defeats this critique through primary documentation. The father researched Natoma and printed military records detailing the USS Natoma Bay. The date stamp on that physical printout confirms the research occurred on August 27, 2000, long before the pilot was identified. Years later, the historical match was finalized. During the Battle of Iwo Jima, only one pilot from the USS Natoma Bay was killed in action, a 21-year-old named James M. Houston, Jr. The ultimate validation lies in declassified aircraft action reports for the exact day Houston's plane was shot down. The flight chart logs every pilot's trajectory. It confirms Jack Larson was objectively real, piloting the aircraft directly next to James Houston. Some theorists propose super psi, the idea that the child telepathically absorbed ambient historical facts from the ether. But telepathy fails to account for the first-person perspective and the visceral, subjective trauma the child actually experienced. Because fraud and cryptomnesia are logically impossible based on the documented timeline, the case demands a radical new ontological mechanism to explain how this information transferred from a dying pilot to a new biological host. When we zoom out from single case studies to Dr. Stevenson's macro archive, broader statistical patterns emerge across thousands of documented subjects. Researchers differentiate between imaged memories, the conscious recall of a specific name or location, and behavioral memories. Behavioral memories manifest as unlearned skills, deeply ingrained phobias, or specific aversions that have no root cause in the child's current environment. Stevenson categorized this phenomenon as developmental karma. This is the observable carryover of distinct personality traits and moral aptitudes from one life to another, operating independently of pop culture ideas regarding immediate punishment. This chart illustrates Dr. Tucker's statistical findings regarding the circumstances of death. The data shows a direct correlation between violence and recall intensity. Over 70% of subjects who report past life memories died unnatural or premature deaths. Furthermore, Tucker identified a statistical correlation regarding moral conduct. A person's demonstrated past generosity and religious observance statistically aligns with higher socioeconomic status in their subsequent rebirth. These behavioral carryovers indicate that human actions possess an inherent, measurable momentum. The empirical data suggests that volition generates a force that survives the complete termination of the biological host. To explain these mechanics, we can look to Bhikkhu Bodhi's interpretation of early Buddhist ontology. This ancient philosophical system provides the exact theoretical engine required to accommodate Tucker and Stevenson's modern psychiatric data. Buddhism does not posit a static, migrating soul. Instead, it defines the stream of consciousness as a sequence of evanescent acts. Each unit of consciousness arises, briefly subsists, and perishes, passing its entire accumulated legacy onto its immediate successor. The mechanism driving this stream is karma, or volition. Every intentional deed performed leaves a subtle imprint, depositing dormant seeds into this onward-flowing sequence. At the moment of physical death, the most powerful, ascendant karma bridges the physical gap. Without a physical body, the accumulated momentum propels the stream of consciousness toward a new reality. Consciousness acts as the seed. It successfully establishes itself only when encountering a new biological host that corresponds to its specific vibrational frequency and accumulated karmic baggage. This ancient theoretical framework neatly maps on to the James Leininger case. A sudden violent death acts as an intensely powerful ascendant karma, propelling specific, high-resolution trauma data across the physical divide and into a new biological host. The ultimate implication of this data extends beyond the mechanics of memory. Bhikkhu Bodhi tests the philosophical weight of this framework by applying it to the limiting cases of human ethics. Consider the limiting case of immoral action, a dictator directly responsible for the dehumanization and systematic deaths of millions of people. Contrast this with the absolute limit of moral action, a self-sacrificing hero who willingly surrenders their own life to secure the survival of total strangers. Under strict scientific materialism, both individuals meet the exact same ultimate destiny, total obliteration. This materialist conclusion conflicts with our deep intuitive sense that moral equilibrium exists, a sense that actions must ultimately yield results proportionate to their ethical quality. The integration of karma and rebirth reveals a universe with an objective, intrinsic moral order operating beyond sensory perception, linking volitional actions to the bedrock of actuality. Integrating psychiatric field data with Buddhist ontology presents a model where present volitional actions actively determine future biological realities. It suggests that the trajectory of a life remains within the reach of individual will, and that human activity is the primary architect of a future existence.